All right, after some technical difficulties, we are back. I am Zoe Levine. This is the Movement. Today, and kind of towards the end of our time together, we're going to be talking a little bit or answering a little bit more of your questions. Two things that have come up so far. One that we can cover today. One is if you're in the field driving a lot, it'll be similar to flying, but if you're in the field driving a lot, what could you bring? What could you do? Little habits that you could put in along the way. And then the other answer would be to this idea, and we'll get more, I guess we'll have movement for both of them, in kind of cold season and a lot of respiratory illness. Are there ways to prevent or open, or, especially after you've had a cold, kind of getting back to when everything's really congested, maybe some things to work on to stay open and getting more breath. So we'll play with both of those things today, moving and learning as we go together. So we'll start with the car. And the car, we think of it in two bits. One bit is the actually being in the car and setting yourself up for success, kind of like sitting in a chair and setting yourself up for success, or we talked about a little bit about the airplane sitting. So well, it'll kind of be review, like it's a great, they're similar to each other, with small differences. So in a car, and feel free, especially those of you that are, well, here live or in the recording, you can be moving or stretching or standing or playing or doing your feet. So if I'm not giving you a movement and your body wants to move in any way, it is not at all distracting. And of course, with me, move, like do whatever feels good for your body, relax and breathe if that feels good, whatever you need, if I'm not showing you an actual movement that you're not trying out. Okay. And that goes for kind of anytime, anywhere. So chairs in cars, especially these days, are very, like, they just encourage you to kind of like head forward, wrap it, that tuck. We've talked about that kind of tuck of the tail. That's, any movement is fine, but if you're sitting in that position all the time, that we get kind of molded in that position, right? It's a cast. We talked about that for being on an airplane too. So there's a couple of different ways you can undo this curve. And seats are changing a little bit now. I've been in some newer cars. They have more of that lumbar support. Sometimes you have little buttons that like fill out the lumbar support. Fancy. I do not have one of those, but I've felt it and it's kind of cool. But what we said on the airplane is you can create a lumbar support. I have a small camping pillow that works really nice. On the airplane, we talked about, I like a puffer vest is nice because it's a nice layer on an airplane too, or just a light jacket that you could roll up and just put it in your lumbar spine. And then having the seat a little bit more upright than you normally would. I know I'm cutting my head off, but I have this cush, but I would do like what's this thing I have? It's not a blanket, but it's kind of mix a little lumbar support. But you have your butt all the way back. You'd have the seat a little bit more upright and just a little something there. So you're more up on, you're kind of pushed up on your sits bones, right? Rather than the slump back. And it's an experiment with what feels good. Like, too much is too much. It's like, oh, it doesn't feel comfortable. But just a slight little, I would do it softer. Rolled up towel might be nice, a small towel. An experiment and see if you can find like a nice place where the back is a little bit more upright. So you can be a little bit more upright without having to work at it. And then, we talk about the rib drop. I'm cutting off my head, but I want to be a little close. We talk about that rib drop, right? Not total slouch, right, with the head forward, but just a little not popped up. So when you get your lumbar support, ideally you're not kind of popped back here with your ribs up either. There can be a little, your ribs can almost rest, right? You're still resting. You're not upright like this and driving perfectly upright, right? That's not going to feel comfortable over long periods of time necessarily. But you can be kind of in a relaxed, more vertical, settled, easy breath in the back of the kidneys, right? All the things that we've talked about in standing, right? And you can kind of let your shoulders settle. Head, you kind of have to play with. I've been in some cars where it really felt like the headrest was ridiculous forward because it wants you to be like low ride in it, right? So that comes forward, so it supports your head. And my mom drives like this, drives me crazy when I get in her car. It's like, how do you like lying down? So the headrest is a lot for that, and for a lot of us that do have kind of a forward head posture and can't get your head back. If it's really far forward, once you're sitting, like once you're upright and the chair is more upright, if it's pushing your head forward, I have before pulled out the headrest, flipped it over backwards so that it's kind of looping the other way. Sometimes you can do that. You can't always. The newer cars I feel like have been better. There's just like, I don't know what decade it was that it's like everyone was really far forward. It happens. I've been in some rental cars like that. So that is my kind of advice for sitting in a car. And it's an experiment. Like you got to find you, right? You got to find your shape that feels a little bit more upright, but still settled into upright and relaxed into it. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's the in car. The other kind of in car habits that you could bring in. This is more if you're doing more stoplights. So you get to a stoplight, that's a good time. You know all the finger stretches that we do? You could do that against the steering wheel. It's just a habit during while you're stopping. And not that it's every time, but it might feel nice to only use your own hands, use the steering wheel. So there's not a lot. It's not that is a lot to do, but a simple tool just to keep hands open. Remember the thumbs. All those are good to keep open and easy. And that helps that whole arm line. So even though you're only paying attention to your fingers, that whole fascial line gets a little bit of attention to just by opening up the bottom, right? Because we've worked on hands and feet in that way too. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that in car. I'm pretty sure that's it. It's mostly about comfortable positioning, a little bit more upright, a little bit less like concave, but finding your comfort, right? Wherever it might be little increments at a time that seat comes a little bit further up, right? And however much lumbar support feels good. The rest would be more about kind of the stops in and out of the car, I think. And this there might be some silly things that you couldn't do if a client would see you. It's like, I don't know, are you stopping at many different houses, or it's like driving far to one thing maybe and kind of interacting there?
It depends, but typically driving, several miles, though some of the locations are far away. And typically I'm going to hotels, apartment buildings, those types of places, and then getting out and going in to talk to somebody.
Okay. So you could, and this will feel really silly for you in the beginning, so I'm just putting it out there. I am the kind of person that will do these silly things anytime, any place, because screw everybody else. Like I would like to feel good in my body. Right. And then, you're going to do your job better. It'll feel good, whatever. So silly habits could be, and like making little rules for yourself for when I stop and get out of my car, if it feels appropriate enough, like even in the parking lot, or maybe, and maybe certain places it's like the clients can see me from here, I'm not doing it. Fine. If it would ever work out at any of the stops to be like, okay, I get out of my car, and my favorite, this is me on road trips all the time, like I'm out of the car at the gas station on the car, right? You're on the hood of the car, taking a stretch out, like doing all the things, the big stretches. A lot of times curbs, we do our calf stretch. A lot of times curbs are a great place for, and that's a little bit less, butt in the swinging in the air, a little more subtle to do just a little calf stretch, when you get out of the car. But both of those are great for unwinding the sitting, right? There's one more, like, a little kind of hip flexor stretch too, because you're in that crease position the whole time. There's just any of that, like one leg forward, one leg back, and kind of just pressing forward, an arm up overhead, quick side bend. It's like quick side bend. It doesn't have to be long. It's just kind of saying hi to your body. And it would be an interesting experiment to try, like going into an interaction with a client without that versus with that kind of body centered, your whole body is there, whole mind and body is kind of together and there and open and ready to serve. And I don't know, it's like it's different. I think it's different, and I would be curious if that it shifts something for you, like you're more grounded, you're like ready to, you're in your body no matter what chaos is going on, in the place that you're at, you are here and you are comfortable in your skin, and you're not, as like you get wound up. I don't know, I get wound up in traffic or driving, and then going into maybe a chaotic situation where you're trying to be the calm and the the peace and the fixer. Like I don't know what it's actually like, but it seems like it would be really lovely to just have and anything that feels good, but the calf stretch, any hamstring stretch that you can do, a little hip opening, maybe a little side breath, and then kind of head in this very grounded, connected place. It might feel different, and I'd be really curious.
Yeah,
And
I think you're right. And just
yeah,
thinking about what you said, to be able to ground myself before I walk in, rather than being in traffic, getting there, popping out, going in, taking a moment to ground and center. I will let you know, but I can already tell you I'd not thought of that, and that sounds terrific.
yeah. And even if you do get to a place, I would say bare minimum, you get to a place where you're like, they can see me clearly, and it would be weird and it would look unprofessional or whatever. Bare minimum, you're in the car and you just take like a couple like deep into your belly and into your pelvis breaths, feel your spine, like slow few. That's another way to just ground simply. And then anything that you can kind of do real quick in the car, if it feels good to you, anything, and then kind of step in. And I think that might be an interesting kind of I don't know, class just about for those of you that are walking in the field, walking into a variety of, again, possibly chaotic situations where people are a little like, what's happening. It might be a really fun little thing to play with other ways of grounding too. So let's take the next like 2 minutes and just talk about lungs a little bit. And I'll give you two things that I love that feel really nice. That have to do with tapping and like vibration and a little bit more acupressure points. And then the other thing I would just leave you with is the idea of anything that we've done to stretch the side body and the back body. So all that flowing side to side, you're just thinking almost as if you were stretching ribs and muscle, but your lungs are moving, right? Anything where you're moving and stretching your ribs, lungs, and your breathe, like just extra breath into that space, right? We've done that a million times, just even side bending, arms up, chest open, like breathing up forward, breathing to the back, any rib motion and stretching I would do, like prevention wise, during as soon as you feel okay to do so. I know with a cough it feels impossible to do all this and breathe, but definitely after, when you're kind of starting to come back to yourself, just finding all the stretches, finding the breath into the stretches, movement, hold, doesn't matter. That would be one thing. The other that I love is just, and you can play with this, just find your sternum. And there's so many different ways. I kind of tend to use my fingertips. You could do whole palm. You could do both fingers. You could do up and down that sternum. But especially when you're getting congested, you can kind of feel things shaking up. There's also a lot of, your immune system, a lot of it's held right. Some of the hormones, I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's not hormones, it's other immune system. I gotta look it up. There's some good stuff behind the sternum. And it's just a great way to kind of stimulate everything. It feels really good, especially after, as you're loosening things up. You can, when I am really gross, like I'll just pound on that sucker with my whole palm. But if you've never played with that before, and you can play with that a little bit higher under your collarbones. So that feels really good. And then in terms of last thing, a couple acupressure points that are part of the immune system and just feel really good. And whether or not they, you know, who knows what or how they're working, but it feels really nice too. If you find your shin bone, and there's all sorts of points kind of just to the side, it feels like a good massage anyway. And sometimes I'll use the balls, like you have that firm ball too. You can roll the ball on the outside of the shin, give it pressure, move it around. And the quick version, since it's just about time to go, is just, you know, you can stay there longer than I am, but little massage all the way down, right? And then the last points, you can do that on both sides. Last points are between, you go between your big toe and second toe. I realize you probably have shoes on, but you can save this for later. It's like right where the metatarsal, you kind of feel a V right between the bones, and you kind of feel where it ends. It's like the end of the V. There's little pressure points between each toe. So between the big and the second toe, and then between the second toe and the third, those are both great points. And you can kind of get them from the top and the bottom. And just give them a little massage. That's a great kind of immune system booster. And it usually feels really good, at least for me. And then you would just do the same things on the other side, the side of the shin. You got the balls. And then the between the toes, like the end of the V. Just a little love. And that can go for before, you know, just prevention wise, it feels really nice. If you feel something coming on, you want to give yourself a little boost, and just kind of after those points might be pretty tender too. But those are my favorite. And it feels so good. Just, it loosens up. If you really get in there, it loosens up your whole lower leg. Walking will feel different, like after everything we do, right? Get your foot all together. All right, I do want to end there and let us go. So we have the possible idea of kind of a grounding pre-interaction with intense situations, work that we could play with. But keep the questions and the thoughts coming, because it's super helpful for me, and then for everybody else to have a little more insight into what to actually do with this stuff, right? So thank you so much for participating and sharing, and I'll let you go. Come on over, say hi or bye before you have to run, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much.
Zoe.
All right, thank you.
It was great.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Have a good rest of your week.
You too.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.